second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
Can I tell you the definition of insanity?
Hello and welcome to episode 73 of PvA Radio. Oh my gosh, that feels good to say. I'm your host, Luke Croft. Joining me, as always, freelance gaming journalist Cody Melkline. Cody, how have you been these last 8 months, my friend? Tell us everything.
I'm hanging in
Don't
there.
leave out any details.
I'm hanging in. I do have to say it's happy to be back on a call that I'm actually looking forward to after all the meaningless Zoom calls I've been on recently. So I really appreciate this.
Yeah, we're putting the fun back in the well, we're not using Zoom because Zoom is trash. We can talk about that in just a moment. But also joining us today, Larry, that was his hair before COVID, Hunt.
It was just before.
Yeah, you did have it cut, and then
I did, very short.
Yeah, how are you doing, friend?
I'm okay, but I'm very thrilled to be back on the podcast.
Man, me too. It is good to be back. We apologize for disappearing for so long. Let me just give a quick explanation as to why we disappeared and a quick explanation as to why we're back. And I think that'll lead us into a little bit of a conversation about what this show is going to look like moving forward. So, near the end of last year, I started thinking about where I wanted to be in life and what I wanted to be doing. And so I started applying for a bunch of jobs in the gaming industry because this is something I've loved for years and years and wanted to finally make the leap. Plus, I was just absolutely hating where I was working at the time. So I ended up getting a job working as a community manager for a publishing company called Modus Games. And I'm still there. None of this is in the past tense. But it required me to move to California. So I am now a West Coast boy. And that made coordinating the podcast just from a logistical standpoint difficult. But also there were a lot of questions about like, okay, how do I exist as like a person in this industry who's working in this industry while doing a show that's honest and where we give you our true thoughts on things, because that's what we pride ourselves on here at PvA Radio, giving you some unfiltered thoughts. I didn't think it was possible, but then I went and I talked to my boss and I asked her and said, hey, do you think it would be possible? Like, I'm really missing doing this podcast with my buddies. And she was basically like, I don't know why you stopped. I think it's a great idea for you to do a gaming podcast. And so we had emergency meetings a couple weeks ago to start talking about bringing the show back. And I'm excited because we have a new format, some new segments, a new like cadence to the podcast. It's going to be cool. But I do want to say this up front, and I'm sorry I'm kind of dominating the top of the show, but I want to say this at the front. There are some things that we're not going to be able to approach and talk about in the position that I'm in. You know, we work with a bunch of different companies. We work with a bunch of different partners. If we approach a conversation like that, I am going to be really transparent about like stepping away from that conversation. Larry and Cody still totally able to have those conversations on the podcast, but if it's something that I feel like I can't start to wade into, then I'll back out of that. And then also, obviously, I'm not going to like divulge any secrets that I may or may not be aware of. So except that Sega Genesis 2 is getting announced next week, but we all knew those rumors were true anyway, right? So,
and Luke has purchased the rights to the Silent Hill game that never came out.
Exactly. I'm also living. My roommate is Hideo Kojima. So,
and Mads Mikkelsen, they come as a package deal.
Yeah, and Jeff Keighley just kind of has like a hammock in the backyard. Anyway, go ahead.
We tried another podcast for a while, and that was fun. Passionauts. We explored things people are passionate about, but we learned some things. We learned that I don't know anything about music. Yep. Luke doesn't know anything about reading.
Nope,
and
can't
Cody
read.
doesn't know anything about Ladybird.
we We did learn that too.
Or I know too much.
A little inside joke for Passionauts listeners. So if those episodes are still up, but you guys have any other thoughts, like as far as kind of some of the things we're gonna have to navigate with the show that I didn't get a chance to hit on?
I think that covered it.
Yeah, I think we'll still be able to have the conversations we want to have. I don't think your position will kind of interfere with too much as far as we know now. And if it does, we'll try to be upfront about that as much as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be about transparency, guys. And, you know, I love my job. I love the company that I work for, and I want to make sure I maintain the relationships that I need to. But I also love doing this show, and I want to do it in the most honest way possible. And so we're going to cross bridges as we come to them. But you're also going to see in this new format, we're going to be talking about a whole lot more gaming stuff than we were back when PvA Radio version 1.0 was in full swing. So what is PvA Radio? This is a weekly show, weekly gaming podcast where me, Cody, and Larry are going to get together. We're going to talk about some of the biggest gaming news stories of the week. We're going to have an in-depth conversation about at least one of them, and we're going to have other conversations about other pieces. And the show is going to be broken up into 3 basic segments. We're going to kick it off with a segment called The Dive, which is going to be a weekly segment where we take a deep dive into a single topic. That'll be a little different this week, but we'll get to that in just a moment. We're going to do The Slant, which is where we take some of the most interesting pieces of gaming news from the week and we give our takes on them. And then the third is Offbeat, where we take some news of the weird and strange goings on in the gaming industry and just kind of bring you into the loop on them. But you can watch us live every single Wednesday over here on twitch.tv/itishoagie at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Pacific Time. You can follow us on Twitter at PvA Radio as well. Guys, I'm ready to hop into it. Are you guys ready to hop into it?
I don't know.
Feel for Real is ready for us to get back into it.
Hell yeah.
So let's kick ourselves off right into The Dive, which is where I want to maybe eventually have a, you know, like a guy going, The Dive, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe we can get the voice of Master
noises.
Chief. Yeah. I like it.
Good
I
James
like
Cameron.
Yes. Like I said, normally this is going to be where we take one topic and just have a really like in-depth conversation about it, but we have missed a lot of in-depth conversations over these last 8 months. We've missed a ton of gaming news. We picked the worst time to stop doing a gaming podcast. There's next gen consoles coming. The industry is shifting at its core because of COVID. There's been all kinds of crazy gaming news that has gone on. But so what I want to do is, we're not going to have time obviously to catch ourselves up on 8 months worth of gaming news, but I do want to stop and say, we know ourselves, right? We know the things we like to talk about in version 1.0 of this podcast. So when you're looking back on what has been the hellscape of 2020, what is,
Amen, brother.
What is the one story that you looked at and thought, damn, I am really upset that I missed being able to talk about that story on the podcast? Cody, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this because we did miss so much. And one of the things I'm disappointed we didn't get to talk about was, at least at length, was the pre-release cycle and then release and then post-release cycle of The Last of Us 2. I don't think we even really talked about, because it came out when we weren't recording. So Luke and I haven't really, we shared preliminary thoughts early on, and I'm not sure if you ever even got back to it, Luke, but it was an interesting game probably for a lot of people who weren't even playing it, and maybe for Larry, who obviously doesn't own a PlayStation, this might be a little bit of a catch up for you as well.
They made a second one.
Yeah.
They made a fourth PlayStation.
Man, do I have some news for you. But yeah, I think it's easiest to start with where I think a lot of stuff started to blow up, which is the majority of the story of this game, which is a narrative focused experience, leaked like I want to say a month before or a few weeks before the game came out. And kind of information about labor conditions was still a topic of conversation at Naughty Dog, as it should be. And the majority of the story leaked. I should note, with very little context outside of just plot points, which is important to note for this conversation. The internet blew up. News sites were reporting on it. And as it became pretty clear, like when the game released, Sony and Naughty Dog's strategy was basically to close ranks and like lock down conversation, try to take control of the narrative essentially for this game. And they did that by creating probably one of the most insane embargo conditions for any game I've seen in a long time. Reviewers largely could not talk about, I want to say 90% of what this game is about when it released, which created obviously a challenge for critics, but also a challenge for consumers who were curious about the game, and a lot of people had probably made their minds up about buying it before, but critics couldn't comment on any of the leaks or anything in the leaks, and it restricted the discourse to an infuriating degree for pretty much everybody involved. And it, as the internet does, factions quickly took form, which is oddly appropriate for the game.
You mean to say that controversy it was a complete breeding ground for people choosing sides of something?
I know, it's mind-blowing stuff.
Maybe the first time in internet history it's happened.
Yeah, but this whole game became kind of like a unique representation of like so many problems, at least in my mind, so many problems and challenges that the games industry is facing. Toxic fandom, based in a lot of misogyny and racism and transphobia, like toxic fandom, but within that also, like we've talked about, like associating yourself so intensely with brands that you become like a slave to them. That was also a major thing. And just basically this whole incident made it extremely frustrating to talk about the game. Even as someone, I largely enjoyed the game. I have my criticisms of it, but voicing your criticisms became like just painting a target on your back. And especially for critics who had a platform, it was difficult. I think people involved with the game could only were coming out and basically piling on top of each other with praise. There was no room for critical discourse, and basically the game was just an absolute minefield from the start.
Yeah, I thought it was the fallout from this game was interesting, because I don't think I can remember another time in games criticism where people who had legitimate criticisms about the game had to go to such lengths to caveat that they didn't belong to a certain one of those particular factions, right? That there was a lot of, like, in the discussions I was seeing, even from like people that wrote at websites, and were covering the game within the industry itself, coming out and saying things like, now, just to be clear, like, this has nothing to do with any of the political or social themes that are within the game, but I have criticisms about these particular things. And I can't think of another time, and correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you guys can think of a time. I can't think of a time I've seen people having to go to those lengths to do that.
Yeah, it was kind of absurd, because it also, I think, has to do with the profile of the game itself. This is like, The Last of Us is the most AAA of the most AAA. It's like a prestige title for Sony. They know that. And it's the game that a lot of gamers point to as like, this is games as art, even though I think that argument is inherently kind of, it's redundant and not really necessary. But there was kind of a protective shield around this game that anyone who wanted to wade into the discourse to just talk about it in general and share their thoughts, it repelled you, because you couldn't voice any legitimate criticisms. And this is a game that's worth like exploring in critical detail, in terms of gameplay, in terms of narrative. Like it's trying to say something, which I admire. And even though I think sometimes it flounders in its attempt to say that thing, I think it's worth exploring what works and what doesn't about that message and the execution of that message. And so it became real frustrating to watch like this explosion around this game that I think everybody involved was super excited to release. They didn't expect to be releasing it under the conditions they released it. I think that's also like an underrepresented part of this is like, I think a large part of the reason like people like creative director Neil Druckmann and like Troy Baker are diving into these conversations is because they're in quarantine and they have very little else to do other than be online all the time. So it was just like a perfect storm for like a disaster to take place around this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bill for real says quad A even from earlier. So I actually missed a lot of this when it happened. The beginning of quarantine was pretty insane for me work-wise. So I was out of the gaming loop, except for Apex, of course, for a long time. But when I read through this stuff, the thing that stood out to me was how journalists were sort of maligned for reporting on the leaks.
Yeah,
and it almost seemed like some of these companies forgot that the journalists don't work as your PR people. That's not their job. Their job is to report the news.
But that's the interesting thing about the games industry, though, right?
Yeah.
Is like in a lot of ways the media is used as an extension of the PR. That's why companies are so guarded with embargoes and they have these really scheduled beats, and the goal of it is to get as much coverage as possible. And I'm not saying whether that's wrong or right. I mean, I think as a games company, it's to your advantage to leverage everything that you have, all the tools that you have at your disposal. But I think there's also some interplay with media coverage where a lot of times the media allows themselves to be used in that way. And so I can see where like that line is blurred and where the gray area comes up. Again, not saying whether it's right or wrong, but it's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and that's typified by that. I think it mentions in that Polygon article that I cited, which is by Patricia Hernandez. But she references an incident with Vice's Rob Zacny, who reviewed the game for Vice, and he was fairly critical of the game. And he received an email from I think it was Sony PR, Naughty Dog PR, Sony PR, where they like reached out to him and like asked him why he thought what he thought. Not in like I want to hear what you thought, but like, did you not get it kind of way? And that's a line of thinking I've seen lobbed at a lot of people who've been critical of the game. Like, oh, you just didn't understand it. Which no, like the game is fairly straightforward in what it's trying to say. It's not exactly, it's subtle in some ways, but not in that way.
It's like Rick and Morty. You're just not smart enough to understand.
Yeah. Like a Christopher Nolan.
You love it.
But it's frustrating because, like, I agree, Luke. It's not only the blurred line between kind of the media and games companies that's kind of resulted in this. It's that for so long, games like this have been like praising games like this was the status quo, and criticism hadn't really caught up to the point. I'll say criticism, but also the voices in the media hadn't caught up to the point where saying some of the stuff, like diving into games in the way they are and talking about games the way they are talking about The Last of Us was not the norm. And I think it's much more broadly the case where, much more, but not still enough, where you have critics who are engaging with this stuff as you would like any other piece of art. And you have diverse voices coming at it. I was pleased to see that there were trans critics who were able to engage with the game and were paid by sites to engage with the game. And And that sort of pierces that protective shield that I was talking about around games like this. And I think the more that happens, I think the better. This game just happened to be it came out at the right or wrong time, depending on how you look at it. And it just so happened to kind of like all of these forces came together around that conversation. It was fascinating to watch and also very disheartening to watch at the same time.
Let me ask you this, Cody, as someone who does or has experience in games journalism, like, how do you measure the newsworthiness of narrative leaks like this? Like like what's the thought process if you get a leak like this, where, like you said, it's kind of like moments of the narrative and not necessarily like a synopsis of the narrative that's leaking? Like, at what point do you look at that and say, oh yeah, that's newsworthy, I'm gonna go with that, I'm gonna print something? And then what's the line where you say, probably just best to wait for this thing to just come out?
Yeah, I think by virtue of the profile, you kind of tend to look at it as the profile of the game. Like The Last of Us Part 2 is one of the biggest games that's coming out this year, and it like large parts of the story leak like a month out. I think that would qualify as newsworthy for almost any publication. I think the way you then kind of report it and write about it is probably more important than whether you write about it at all. If you choose to write about it, I think caveating it all with these are snapshots with very little context, spoilers ahead, whatever you need to, like, that's kind of a given, but it's for some people it seems to be necessary. But I think by virtue of the profile that The Last of Us Part 2 holds in the space, that it's worth reporting. And it's just like, it's a part of your job. Like, that's the frustrating part. Like, the kind of people criticizing reporters for reporting on leaks. If Tenet, the Christopher Nolan movie, had leaked ahead of release, you'd sure see a lot of film sites reporting on it. It's just part of the biz. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, definitely a huge story that I wish we would have been doing a podcast so we could have talked about it as it unfolded. But in the interest of keeping things moving here, Larry, let's move on to you. What's the big story you wish you could have talked about?
So as this podcast is relaunching, I just want to remind everyone that I tend to talk about stories from 10 years ago, so this one is right up my alley.
Alan Wake.
Alan Wake. Will it have a sequel? Let's wait and see.
Actually in the news right now, though.
Yeah, because isn't there like Control DLC with Alan Wake?
Yeah, there's a crossover.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, my story is actually Halo Infinite, which only feels like a story from 10 years ago.
So true.
But yeah, we finally got to see some Halo Infinite, and it was announced as a launch title, and that was very exciting. And I'm drawing on 3 articles, 2 from Kotaku. One, Halo Infinite looks to the past to bring the series into the present by Ari Notice on Kotaku. The other from Kotaku is Halo Infinite delayed to 2021 by Ian Walker. And the third one is from Forbes. Microsoft brings back Halo veteran to get delayed game back on track by Dina Bass and Jason Schreier. But yeah, we got this great announcement. Halo Infinite's coming. I'm a Halo fan. I love it. Lots of Halo fans were excited. And then we saw the trailer, and there was some mixed reception of that trailer.
That's putting it lightly. Yes.
Because the trailer looks very similar to trailers from Halo 3, which was a long time ago. And in light of that backlash, the defense of the game from 343 was, look, this was a deliberate decision to make it look visually similar, to really lean into that nostalgia feel. And a lot of people didn't really buy that, but okay. But then a couple weeks later, they delayed the game. And that was kind of huge, because as far as Xbox One's launch,
Xbox Series X.
Thank you.
There we go.
Xbox Series X's launch lineup, this was like the most exciting one. So that pushback, that was a huge deal. And it, for me at least, it was difficult for me to be like, this backlash and this delay are unrelated. but that was kind of the narrative. And then we got hit with the double whammy of bringing 2 new project leads in the form of Joseph Staten and Pierre Hintz. I think I'm saying his name right. But Joseph Staten is going to work in with the campaign and the story. And the idea was that they're going to bring these guys in and get this game back on track, which sort of showed us that they at least recognize that the game needs put back on track in some capacity. And so, again, I would have loved to have been covering this as it was coming out and not just hitting you with this wrap up here at the end here. But this whole story is a testament to something we've talked about several times on PvA Radio, which is that Halo just struggles to find a place in the modern gaming. Halo was gaming for so long, and it's like Blockbuster, right? They can't seem to make the shifts they need to make to fit into the new landscape. And I think part of the problem is the fan base. There were some fans of Halo who saw that trailer. They're like, pumped. This is the same game I've been playing for 20 years. A lot of the established fan base can't move past it. But if 343 can't move past it either, they're not going to connect with the new fan base that they need to keep the game alive. So, yeah, I vomited all my thoughts.
Yeah. I just want to say that, like, when I saw that footage, I had no complaints about the gameplay. Like, the gameplay I think the gameplay looked really fun. It looked like Halo. It certainly looked like Halo, and there were actually intimation, like, they were implying that this was a semi-open world with the map, and it seemed like, I mean, we've only seen a very small vertical slice of what this game is. But based on that, like, the gameplay looks smooth as hell. Some of the new weapons looked cool. Obviously, the large part of the complaints were about the graphics, but I think it was more than just the graphics. It was because part of this goes to art style, and I think that conversation has been kind of overlooked in all this. Like, whether or not you want to buy what 343 said, it seems that it was a deliberate. They had a look they wanted to go for, and they went for it. I think I buy that to varying degrees. I buy that line of thinking. I also I buy that we should allow artists to exercise their artistic vision, and even if it differs with what we want specifically. Now there are obviously visual elements of that trailer that are not up to modern AAA standards that we would expect. I don't think that Halo has ever been, at least to my mind, the benchmark for graphical fidelity. I think it's always ridden high on its gameplay.
Well, the main like comparison that I kept seeing was like the pilot compared to Joel in The Last of Us Part 2. And I'm like, that's just a totally unfair comparison. Like you said, it's an art direction decision. It's 2 totally different game styles, and it's like Halo's going to have a lot more in terms of just scope of gameplay than The Last of Us is going to have, and so it's not necessarily the focus. And it's just it's one of those just classic conversations that people have where they think they're making like an interesting point when in reality they're just kind of overlooking like you said, the decisions that are consciously being made about the game. Now, I think that there was valid criticism of some of the stuff that was shown in that. But again, like, the narrative just tends to get away from people. Especially with a game like Halo, where I used to say, like, man, people are really rooting for Halo, and they just tend to be disappointed. But I think it just continues to be proven that no, like, people just have really, I think I told you this, Larry, after I said people don't want a new Halo. They want to go back to 2008. Yeah. And it's not that they want Halo 3 even. Like, that's not what I'm saying either. Like, they just want to go back to the simplicity and the nostalgia of life in 2008 when you were sitting in your dorm room playing Halo 3 with your buddies. Like, and they feel let down because it's not Halo that's able to capture that nostalgia, that essence. If so, Master Chief Collection would have been like a far bigger deal. But it's just that, oh man, like the you don't know they're the good old days until they're gone, right?
Yeah.
To quote The Office.
Yeah. It's just it's so significant to see like that criticism though result in the sort of action that has been taken at 343. And it's like it's enough to kind of give me PTSD from the original Destiny, where they like shifted narrative directors like halfway through and brought in, I think, someone who had worked on the original Halo or someone who like a long-time Bungie employee to kind of shore up what was happening. It's not a great look. And to be honest, like I think Halo's struggling to, as you said, Larry, to find a place in modern gaming. We've talked about that at length on this podcast.
That was what the first episode of this podcast was all about.
I think so, yeah. But a lot of the conversation around this has made me question. Like I went back and played through all the Halo games as part of the Master Chief Collection because I forgot that I had it from Game Pass from a little while ago. And when I got to Halo 4, which was the first game that 343 took over for, there was like a jolt, like not just in terms of gameplay, but like there was I detected something missing, and I'm not sure what that is. And maybe that's my nostalgia speaking. But I'd like to think I could detach myself enough to be able to think about it critically. So I guess what I'm saying is I sort of question whether we've given 343 the shot at this, and maybe it's time to just either hang up Halo or pass it on to someone new and just start completely fresh without Master Chief.
I'm in that vein too. Like it's not that they've done a bad job. Like sure. They've done a fine job of making a fun game. Like Halo 4 had fun multiplayer. Halo 5 had fun multiplayer. And at the end of the day, that's what people are buying Halo games for mostly. But the story elements, did you get through Halo 5 as well?
Yeah.
So, it's been a while since I played them, but I have no idea how Halo 4 connects to Halo 5, and I'm a pretty big fan of the series, I feel like 343 has never had like a solid idea of exactly where they wanted to go. They just wanted to make a Halo game, and that's why it feels so much like it's in a mold of some sort. And I would love to see the studio take a crack at something different.
They're clearly talented people there.
Yeah. But as for what it is, like, I'm a little concerned about the narrative. But at the end of the day, I'm also like highly confident it's going to have a fun multiplayer aspect.
Yeah.
So I'm not like worried about the game as a whole.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought about what you do with the property. Like, and look, all this is being said without us even knowing what Halo Infinite is like. We know very, very little about Halo Infinite, to be quite frank, and so it's maybe a little bit unfair of us to speculate on 343's handling of this game. And who knows, maybe these kind of 11th hour changes are gonna add some different elements that will inject new life. But I don't know, they walk this fine line. Like, there's a decision paralysis I can imagine happening with if you're in charge of making a Halo game, to where I think about, like, was it Halo? Well, like Halo 5. I remember seeing gameplay for Halo 5, and like the brambling and the faster style gameplay, like some of those things that absolutely have to happen in order to get new people to be interested in this game when they're going up against the Call of Duties and the Apex Legends and other first-person shooters of the world. But then you see the core fan base's reaction to those kind of changes that are bringing it into modernity, and it's like, I can understand a studio looking at it and being like, we're not sure who we want to try to appease. Like, do we go for these people who have been playing this game for years and we know that they're going to love it, but we're really not going to have an opportunity to pull in a new fan base? Or do we take the risk of bringing new people in at the expense of pissing off people who have been a fan of this franchise for a long time. Like, I think the story stuff, all of that criticism, completely valid, right? The gameplay criticism was always hard for me to stomach because it was really like 343 understands what this game needs to have to be appealing. And look, I played Halo 3, and I only want to go back to Halo 3 when I'm feeling like playing a game like Halo 3. You know, like I'm not craving a new Halo 3 experience. And I think about what's Ubisoft's new battle royale, Hyperscape.
Yeah.
And like to me, that has some real like Halo vibes to the gameplay. And it just didn't like connect with me. I was like, this may have felt good 10 years ago, but it doesn't feel that good right now.
Yeah. Halo suffers from the same thing my other favorite franchise suffers from, Star Wars, which is the fan base. If Halo as a franchise dies, it will be because the fans that claimed to love it murdered it.
Yeah.
And I realize it's ironic for me to be here because I started this off being very critical of 343. But I think that 343 is where they're at because of, like you said, that decision paralysis that's been brought on by the more we change this, the more backlash we're going to get from our fans. But we have to make some changes. And for this trailer, they didn't strike the balance of appeasing new people. But I can't help but feel like if this had been a dramatic step up for Halo, you would have had people been like, this isn't Halo.
Do you think a little bit of that though is like that whole event that gameplay was at, like people seem to be pretty underwhelmed by the Xbox Series X gameplay that was shown. And I think some of this is probably like unrealistic expectations of what that leap from this gen to next gen is supposed to look like. I think most of the leaps we're gonna experience are gonna be through the feel of the games and rather than the visuals of the game. Like, oh shit, like this loads so fast and these worlds are so much bigger. Like those are the ways that I think we're gonna sense the change. I think people just had unrealistic expectations going into that event, and they were thinking just like, oh, it's gonna look like a fucking photograph of Master Chief.
Yeah.
But I think about to go back to Naughty Dog, right? Like think about who Naughty Dog was before Uncharted, before The Last of Us, like in the games that they made, and they had to take risks. Like were there people when they announced Uncharted that were like, no, Naughty Dog, we just want you to make another Crash, or like we want you to make another Jak and Daxter.
Yeah,
like,
another Jak and Daxter,
like I'm sure there were those people, but you have to take those risks. And but now look at like when Crash Bandicoot comes back, like Crash 4 just got announced. It's really just an exercise in nostalgia. It's not really anything that like, I don't know if people are legitimately excited about Crash who aren't just like fans of Crash.
Yeah, but they also know, like, I think they know what that game is and they know who it's for. Like that team has gone in knowing full well what that project is. Like it is, as you said, an exercise in nostalgia. Sure, it looks better and there'll probably be some gameplay additions, but like the only people who are going to play that are Crash fans or maybe kids who are getting exposed to Crash for the first time and their parents bought it for them. Halo is trying to escape the shadow of nostalgia, and like just at every turn it can't, because as you said, Larry, because of the fan base. It's sad to see, because I'd love to see Halo's like God of War moment, where it understands what it is and and the team reinvents it for a whole new generation of gamers. But I guess again, we haven't seen much of Infinite, and we probably, I guess, won't see a lot of it for a little while.
The Halo Tetris crossover we've all been waiting for.
Yes.
Let's make it happen.
Before we leave this topic, Cody, you mentioned before the show, or maybe it was Luke, the thing that stood out to you from this article, from this story, the monster stuff.
Oh, well, we'll talk about that a little later.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, I've got that further down in the show notes, Larry.
Yes.
Study up, my friend. He's trying to rush this show along.
Let's move. I got places to be. I've got Apex games to play.
All right, let's move on to my story. There's one story that has enamored me and really the internet, the internet at large, even outside of gaming. And that has been the mysterious ban of Dr. Disrespect from Twitch. A story that, as more time goes by, the more confused I get about it. So a couple months ago, out of the blue, Twitch just straight up banned Dr. Disrespect and had, in a series of kind of really strange events unfolded, there was a really odd ending to Dr. Disrespect's last stream that people speculated on what the reason for that was. The next day, his account was just gone. And not only was his account gone, but Twitch was refunding subs back to people who had subbed to them, which is totally out of the norm. When people get banned, normally they just let all of the subs lapse, but no money changes hands at that. There were some odd tweets about how Dr. Disrespect's career was over, and that when the reason for his ban comes out, that he won't be able to basically show his face in public ever again. There were other weird tweets about, like, I know the reason Dr. Disrespect was banned, but I can't say, I'm afraid to say. And there was this feeling among everyone that we were like, this had to have been something significant. Like, Twitch just doesn't send the cash cow out to pasture for no good reason. But then about a month later, Dr. Disrespect starts doing this weird, like, press tour. And he's giving interviews with, like, the Washington Post and some who else did he do it with? PC Gamer?
Yeah.
Where he's doing interviews and he's, like, still going on this line of, like, Twitch banned me. They haven't told me why they've banned me yet. It's been a month. And here we are a month after that. He's back on YouTube. He's back to streaming on YouTube now. And he's sticking with the line of he doesn't know why. And I'm starting to wonder in my brain if Dr. Disrespect really doesn't know why he was banned. Guys, what have you made of this story throughout?
First, Budzors in the chat says, glad you boys are back. We're glad you're back too, Budzors.
Yes.
Second, it's been confusing. I'm with you. Like, especially his final Twitch stream, there's a lot of seed to sprout conspiracy theories from.
I'll tell you what, man. I was NCIS in that shit. I was just like, enhance for like 3 days straight.
Luke was waking in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. Why is Dr. Disrespect gone?
I was literally
even like Dr. Disrespect.
No, I'm not a Dr. Disrespect fan at all. I was just like totally swept up in the drama. I was literally texting Larry at just like all hours of the day to tell him about all the latest in Dr. Disrespect.
Because that stream ended abruptly and weirdly, and it seemed like something was going down, and there was this air of any day now, we're going to find out what happened. What did he do? Here we are months later.
It's the most anticlimactic story of 2020 so far.
Yeah, the longer it went on, the more I began to question my immediate assumptions about what had happened. Because I mean, Dr. Disrespect is no stranger to controversy as a streamer. He's been involved in other. I think we may have talked about it on the show with the streaming in a public bathroom at PAX or something, or was it E3? I can't remember which
it was. E3. Yeah,
it was E3. Yeah, that whole thing. I believe this story originally broke also around the time that the games industry was being swept by like a suite of like sexual harassment scandals, various like all over, from journalism to publishers to developers, to Twitch streamers and content creators. So I think a lot of people immediately flashed to that and made assumptions about that. But just like the longer it went on, the more I just started to question, like, who's like you said, Luke. is he really so out of the loop as to the reason that he was banned? Because I feel like something would have come out of this if he actually knew why he was banned.
Bill for real says he doesn't know. So Bill's in the boat of he doesn't think Dr. Disrespect knows.
I think that Dr. Disrespect doesn't know for one reason and one reason alone. Say all you want about the character of Dr. Disrespect and all of the fuck ups that you've just listed there, Cody, and all the things that, you know, we know he's done. He's nothing if not like wholly transparent about the shit that goes down. And he really is like willing to own up to his stuff when it goes down. Like when he was caught having the affair on his wife, he owned up to that. The bathroom stuff, it took Twitch eons and he made a big deal out of his return. But you know, at the end of the day, he did say like, hey, that was a fuck up on my part. And he was at least transparent about it. He hasn't said anything. And like, I think he was just giving interviews even like yesterday talking on stream yesterday about like how he still feels so much anxiety over it because like at one moment he had this life and then Twitch was just able to undercut basically everything from him, you know? And so I believe in the line that he doesn't know what's happened. And it's just totally wild to me. And Twitch has that line of like, we don't disclose why we ban content creators publicly. But when I mean, this wasn't just like, it wasn't like us with our 10 viewers over on Twitch, and Twitch just like nuking our channel and then moving on, right? Like they were in a multi-million-dollar, multi-year deal that they had just recently signed with Dr. Disrespect. And so it's not like easy peasy, like we want to get rid of you to get out of a deal like that. There's got to be a legal reason to want to do it.
Or a financial reason, because I know a lot of people theorized about Twitch's relationship with Ninja, I believe. And their attempt perhaps to kind of get him back in the Twitch family after him going over to Mixer and kind of freeing up whatever financial investment they had in Dr. Disrespect. I don't know how much I buy into that. But yeah, you'd think that there would be some, from at least on his part, you'd think he would have come forward if something had actually occurred that he knew about. Of course, you could say maybe it's so significant that he doesn't want to comment on it and sort of risk jeopardizing some sort of legal thing. But I feel like he is nothing but straight with people. Even as he plays this outlandish character, I feel like he does get real with people, with his audience. Like they do know him to a certain extent.
Yeah. So I don't know. Do you guys think we'll ever get an answer to this?
I hope so.
Eventually, but at this point, I'm not waking up at 3 a.m. to ask myself.
Yeah. My search history for Dr. Disrespect has now been pushed out of the top 7 or whatever it shows you on Twitter. So, so those are just that's just a brief look at a few of the stories that we missed while we were away here in 2020. But you guys don't have to worry about that anymore, because as Big Boy Roy, or as you guys know him, Roy Speedrun, says in the chat, the boys are back in town, all right? And also, Big Boy Roy, thank you so much for the Tier 1 subscription. Let's see. Big Boy Roy says, in my opinion, I think he knows exactly why he was banned. Maybe I'm just always assuming the worst, but I think it was something nefarious and money is keeping it quiet. Yeah, there could be an element of that where Twitch is like, hey, we don't want to know that, we don't want it out there that we've aligned with somebody who's done this thing. And there could be some dark, shadowy stuff like that too. But I feel like if that was the case, then Dr. Disrespect would figure out like an interesting way to say something about it.
Twitch would have, I feel like Twitch would have dealt with it more tactfully than just cutting him off all of a sudden, because that immediately raises suspicion. Like if people didn't think something was wrong before, you just severing ties with them all of a sudden certainly makes them think there's something wrong.
Yeah, that's true too. So who knows? We'll stay, but now if there is an answer, you're going to hear about it here.
Yeah,
we're gonna cover it here. So, all right, guys. Well, that does it for the dive. Again, that's gonna look very different next week because we're just gonna laser focus in, deep dive into one specific topic. But let's move on to our next segment, the slant, which is where we'll have a voice come in. And it's like the slant, and it's like a line that goes like that, and then it goes slanted like that.
Let's workshop it.
We'll workshop it. PlayStation 5 Direct pre-orders are now up and available. No, they're not. Signups for Direct pre-orders are up and available. So this is over just on the PlayStation website here. So you can sign up with your PlayStation ID to reserve a limited quantity of consoles. And so this is a sign up, essentially.
Sorry, I forgot what the PlayStation 5 looked like in I saw it.
We never talked about that.
We can stop for story we missed. We can stop for a moment and talk about this for a second. We've heard all of the modem comparisons. It definitely looks like a modem. I was really
Eva from Wall-E. That's my favorite.
I was disappointed when they revealed some of the box art for it. I think it was Wario64 a couple weeks ago was showing off like what PlayStation 5 boxes look like. And I was like, man, I'm really disappointed they didn't just go with 2 giant wings coming off the top of the game boxes as well, making it just completely impossible to store it in any organized way on your shelf. But I will say I like the controller.
Yeah, the controller's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It looks like it's
white.
What's that?
I like the decision to go different and go with white.
But they didn't. They went with white and black, and like
I know, but I'm a sucker for white and black.
See, I like it. It's funny because I always shift. Like if a console releases and it's all black, I'm like, man, I really want a white console. But then if it launches and it's all white, I'm like, man, I'd really like a black console.
You're just a contrarian.
That's true. I just
I like that they're taking a shot at something different.
I wish they had just totally copied the Switch and the one wing was red and the other one was blue.
Big Boy Roy in the chat says, I'm with Cody. Everyone has been shitting on the design, but I like it quite a bit. I don't necessarily dislike it from like an aesthetic standpoint, but to me, it's from like where does this go standpoint. First of all, the thing is huge. Have you seen like size comparison shots of this thing? The thing is fucking massive. But also, when you have these weird shapes and you have like a desk or a shelf, it's like, man, where do I put this thing? And if I'm gonna have like things next to it, how do I get them to line up? And yeah, like I've got some concerns in that regard.
It's actually so massive that they're hoping you'll buy 2 like this and set your TV stand on top of the 2. And
the thing is huge. I don't get that either. Like, I think to me, the Xbox Series X, like a lot of people think it's plain because it's just a box with like holes in the top. I think it's sleek. I think it looks nice.
It reminds me of that Silicon Valley episode. I don't know if either of you have watched that show.
I've watched the first 2 episodes.
So like the Amazon or like Google proxy in that show releases like the box. And it's literally just a black box, and everybody makes fun of them relentlessly for it. But I mean, it's the Xbox. I'm fine with that. Like, I ultimately don't care because I don't care how it looks on my shelf as long as I can play games with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still gonna buy it. I'm still gonna pre-order it.
Oh yeah. You're gonna pre-order it.
This is such a weird like. Just what a weird lead up to this.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. Like, and I know a lot of this stuff. Like, I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt. Like, I know a lot of these plans changed because of COVID, and like, I think there's a big concern with being able to fulfill orders and like stock and that sort of stuff. Like those things haven't gone back to normal. And I imagine that's really kind of dictated some of the strategy here, but it's felt even weirder than it's maybe needed to be in this strange world in terms of like the lead up to a console launch. Like I feel really no excitement over these things for some reason.
This feels like the the game version of like a trailer for a trailer. Like even the language they're using to describe it, like register for an opportunity to be one of the first to pre-order your PS5. That's just an absurd phrase.
But the thing is it's so like it's so perfect for gamers. Like I can see the tweets. I can see the tweets of people being like, "I was one of the first to pre-order the PlayStation 5." Like it's the same thing of like when the news goes to Best Buy on a console launch night and that first guy comes out and he's like holding that shit up like he's not about to get shanked in the parking lot or whatever. And he's just so excited to be the guy.
Big Boy Roy says it's impossible to feel excitement in 2020. And I think that's part of it, but...
That feels too real.
But I also think that in spite of how much I'm opposed to the iterative console thing that's been floated before, we're kind of already there. Like, we're on the third iteration of the Xbox One already, right? At least.
Yeah.
So it's just like every couple of years we've got a new one anyway. So I don't. For me, it's gotten to the point where the hardware's updating so quickly that I've actually decided to go PC gamer next console generation. I'm not jumping over with it. So
breaking news right here, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it. He has a PC. He bought a PC.
Did. Glorious.
We just got to get Cody in now. I don't think Cody doesn't strike me as the guy who's ever gonna jump the party line there.
I always say that I want to because most of my friends play on PC, and I do genuinely want to. It's just a matter of I'm not the kind of person who like cares too much about graphical fidelity.
Yeah.
And I also like really don't want to put the work in. I'm like, just give me the box. Let me start my game up and let me go. I don't want to troubleshoot.
Look, man, just buy a pre-built. You know,
that's what I did.
Like I bought a pre-built.
There are too many options here. That's the problem.
We'll talk about this offline, dude. I got you.
Okay.
If you want to get into this, we can get into this. Like
I appreciate it.
It has not been a hard. I've had my PC now for a year and a half, and I don't think it's ever been really a hassle of any kind. So, all right, let's keep on the PlayStation 5 track. But Cody, let's kick it to you.
Yeah. So this was an interesting piece of news, probably within the grander context of like the next gen console race. There was over on Kotaku and a number of other news sites, we saw a report that the PS5 will only be backward compatible with PS4 games, not going all the way back to PS3, PS2, PS1. And of all places, this came from a support page post from Ubisoft, which is very 2020, to be honest.
I feel like Ubisoft has leaked a couple other things with regards to this generation.
They're such a leaky ship over there, just in terms of their own stuff too. But the support page stated, and this comes from Kotaku's article about that from Ethan Gach. I want to say Gach. Backwards compatibility will be available for supported PlayStation 4 titles, but will not be possible for PlayStation 3, PlayStation 2, or PlayStation games. And Sony has obviously previously said that the console will be backward compatible with PS4. But this is the first indication we've got about going in the Wayback Machine and what that means for games like Jack and Daxter games, which I think may have been re-released on PS3, but I'm not sure if they were ever re-released on PS4. And so, yeah, I think this is interesting, especially in light of the tact that Microsoft is taking, where they're like, you can play anything on anything. We'll give you all these games day one, even if they aren't new, they're on Game Pass. You can at least play all that. We're doing backwards compatibility with all this stuff. It's just I think it's an interesting look at the strategies these two console manufacturers are taking. Especially with the as we said before, the weird kind of rollout strategy Sony has taken with like pretty much just showcasing technical details that only the most hardcore of the hardcore care about.
I honestly can't believe that this is even newsworthy, to be honest with you. And I'm someone that like I still have my Super Nintendo games from when I was 3 years old. Like, but as that weird someone who hangs on to games, I realize that most of my friends don't. and the top selling games every year are iterations of previous year game. Like, the reality is gaming has just moved to this point where almost everything is online, almost everything is updated frequently. I just don't see the demand for this. I'm surprised that it's even backwards compatible to PS4. And I suspect that any backlash is really just a very vocal minority. I really don't think that many people care, to be honest.
I was about to caveat what I said by I'm about to get dragged for this, and then Larry just jumped right in and said it. So I'm glad I'm not the only one saying it. Like, I don't know. I don't get it. Like, I feel like if you've got a big collection of PS1 discs that you're like itching to play, you've got a PlayStation 1 console to just like put them in and play. Yeah. Like, I don't get this idea that like, okay, I should be able to put whatever disc I want inside of this box and be able to play it. Like, we all know the much maligned development issues with the PlayStation 3 and how difficult that was. And it's like, do I really want Sony wasting time and resources and energy on figuring out how to emulate PS3 games on PlayStation 5 just by putting the disc in? Like, no. I'd rather that, like, when you can just go buy a PlayStation 3 for $50 right now and play all your PS3 games. Like,
yeah.
To me, it, like, we don't expect this in any other kind of media, right? Like, Larry, when you got your first DVD player, did you look at your VHSs and think, damn, why am I not able to pop this VHS into this DVD player? And then I guess this is unfair because they did have the VCR DVD player combos. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe they just need to hot glue a PlayStation 3, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 1 to this thing. Just side by side.
That's the solution.
Like, look, it's already not the prettiest of consoles. Just start chucking other shit onto it.
This is interesting. This is not where I thought this conversation would go. I didn't even see it as like you need to have your physical media play with this thing, because that's not, as far as I know. I think Xbox is obviously the Xbox One is compatible. As far as I know, it's backward compatible with 360 and original Xbox. Is that true, Luke?
That sounds right.
And yeah. I know that the Series X is going to be compatible with all that stuff too. I guess I just see it as like, I feel like consoles are increasing. I have been and are increasingly becoming more than just like hardware. They are platforms. Like, Microsoft is clearly going in that direction. And so the way I view it, I guess, is as a platform, I like the option to be able to like experience the full history of your catalog. I'm someone who likes to preserve games and hang on to them, preserve gaming history, be able to experience it if I haven't yet. And so I guess that's what the Xbox is for, to be able to kind of dig into that back catalog and experience that. It's just maybe it's not as significant. Maybe I'm probably in the vocal minority, but I think being able to
Cody's
have
flaming developers on Twitter. Where's my backwards compatibility?
I don't even think like, I think having two console manufacturers that are focused on two very different things is fine. I think it's better for the market. And so that's what my Xbox can be for. I guess I like the option to have that. And it shows me that Microsoft is focused on providing options like that to players, which is sort of heartening. Even, I mean, it's obviously going to drive revenue, but having an option like that is great to have in your back pocket.
And don't get me wrong, like, I think if it's there, it's fine.
Yeah.
But I just think the expectation is weird.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, and I totally understand that. Microsoft has clearly built its whole infrastructure around this too. Not around backward compatibility, but around these sort of features.
Well, I mean, specifically for backward compatibility, I mean, they figured out a way to emulate mid console generation original Xbox games. Like, I can't remember who it was that talked about maybe it was Major Nelson talking about like how big an undertaking it was. Like they didn't go into the Xbox One thinking this thing can play Xbox games. They like had to figure it out, and they had to figure it out in a firmware way where everybody who'd purchased an Xbox wouldn't have to go buy new hardware in order to do it. So I applaud them for doing that, but it's created entitlement's a strong word. It's an
unfair expectation.
To me, it's an unfair expectation. That's a good way to put it.
I totally get
that. Another reason I wish we'd had a gaming podcast, just a little preview of things to come. I've got lots of things to say about Nintendo these days, but one positive thing that I'd like to say about them is, like, they've got the way to do it, right? You just create a digital storefront to handle these backwards compatible titles that people actually care about. But as far as like popping a disc in and playing it, like that approach, just think about the big games over the last 5 years. How many of them could you even go back and play if you wanted to, you know? And what does that mean?
Look, Nintendo's got it figured out in a much simpler way of just like, where the hell are you going to put a Wii U disc in this thing?
Yes. PlayStation needs to go back to cartridges.
That's what
they never had cartridges.
No,
actually, they're the one.
Yeah. Xbox didn't have cartridges either, Larry.
Nope.
All right, we're kicking Larry off. I came up with a scene where it's just me and you, Cody. Let me switch.
Sega needs to go back to cartridges. Wait, they don't exist anymore. Well, not as a console. I know video games.
Until the Sega Genesis 2 gets announced next week, like we talked about at the top of the show. So, which will be, it won't just be one cartridge though. It's like 3 cartridges together that you have to put in simultaneously.
And the other thing first. The other thing Nintendo has learned from this is the same thing Skyrim has taught us. You can sell the same game over and over and over. And why wouldn't you?
Yep, exactly. All right, let's move on to our next story. Cody, kick us off here.
Also, it just happens to be also Ubisoft related more directly, but the new Tom Clancy game, Tom Clancy's Elite Squad, which is a mobile game from Ubisoft, has been getting a lot of attention lately, and not for great reasons. There was a intro video released for it, and the narrative in the game is something to behold. So stop me if you've heard this on the dark web, but the plot of this game is that there is a shadow organization called Umbra, which is a global terrorist network that is using popular kind of protest movements as kind of a guise to weaken governments. I don't know if that's if you've seen that implication on Facebook recently from your uncle, but
my grandfather.
Okay, or grandfather. But yes, this is the plot that was kind of loosely outlined in the video. To say that it was like dragged on Twitter and social media would probably be an understatement. But Ubisoft came forward and expressly apologized for one element of the trailer, which was using kind of the raised fist imagery, which has become kind of known with a lot of progressive social movements, but most recently the Black Lives Matter movement, using that in basically a right-wing conspiracy video. Now, it's worth noting that is the only element of the trailer that they apologized for.
And the only one that they changed.
And the only one that they'll change with an update. Because the game is already out. At least a beta version of it is out, I believe. This is, I mean, watching that video, it's absurd that this was not like second guessed by at least someone at Ubisoft. But it becomes less surprising that it wasn't questioned when you consider some of the other news that's kind of swirled around Ubisoft recently. Stories about kind of harassment of female employees, a culture of casual racism, misogyny, and specifically specifically criticisms of the all-white editorial board, which has resulted in like some all-white male editorial board, which has resulted in some of the decisions the studio has made over the past few years, namely like splitting the difference between a male and female protagonist for Assassin's Creed Odyssey. When I believe the original pitch was to just have Cassandra, the female protagonist, be the default protagonist, the only protagonist. So this trailer coming out when it did is kind of a lightning rod for a lot of the conversation that's been happening around Ubisoft. I don't know if this came across your timelines at all, if you saw this, but like the overtones of it are not subtle at all, and it's like I had to like do a double take when I watched it. I had to watch it a second time because I'm like, there's no way that they legitimately released this in 2020.
So you put this in the show notes, and I hadn't actually seen it before you put it in the show notes. And I'm gonna read what you have in the show notes first,
please,
for context. What you put is Ubisoft apologizes for co-opting Black Lives Matter imagery in a trailer for its new Tom Clancy game without addressing the real problem. Which was not that was you, like
that's me editorializing.
Yeah. So I did what I like to do in these situations. Like, I read that and I thought, oh, that sounds bad. But I'm gonna give it the benefit of the doubt and look at what happened. Like, was it an honest mistake? Was it something like just subtly in the background that maybe somebody slipped in and it was just easy for them to not notice? And then I was like, I'm just gonna roll this and see. First of all, you're presented with the black fist imagery, the raised fist imagery across the screen for the first 5 seconds of the video, and then it starts going into all of the stuff about like how these protesters are being paid by this shadow organization to uproot, and I'm like, Tom Clancy games have always been, I mean, Tom Clancy as like a writer, it was always like kind of commentating on this near future world that was always possible, and like it was always kind of a direct commentary on the things that were happening at the time. But this seemed like so left of center, like in the sense of missing the mark, not politically. They didn't even feel like they hit the board, honestly. Like, I don't understand it. And I thought what the craziest thing was like, and I don't have the article pulled up anymore. The way that some of the contracted writers were talking about how it sounds like they went and they were like, okay, we're going to get you to write 2 pages. And then in order to not let people kind of know what we're doing here, we're going to let somebody else write the next 2 pages. It's almost like at a high level, they kind of knew what they were doing in terms of the story, but didn't want to hear it internally. So they broke up the labor to get the story written in a really strange way. I say that totally not knowing exactly how writing in games generally goes, but I don't imagine it's always like contracted writer do a little bit here. I'm trying to find those quotes, but
it said it's so that the quote from the Kotaku article by Ethan Gatch, it says a narrative designer who said he did contract work on the game tweeted out earlier today that Umbra, the shadow organization, had been presented to him as a James Bond-esque villain, not something that sounds straight out of a QAnon conspiracy post.
And it legit does.
It does. It reads the trailer reads verbatim like a conspiracy post, an alt-right conspiracy post.
Yeah, like you can replace like Umbra with George Soros, right? Like, I don't understand even a little bit how this got through, and I'm not like, I'm gonna say this, like, I tend to not be incredibly sensitive, like, to little things. Like I said, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt that mistakes can happen. Like, this blows past any of that.
Yeah. So the article does indicate one explanation, potential explanation. So the game is developed by the French studio, I want to say Alliant, which is based in Paris. It's co-managed by 2 men, one of whom, Charlie Guillemot, is the son of the CEO of Ubisoft, Yves Guillemot. I can't pronounce French names.
Yves Guillemot.
Yves Guillemot. Yeah. The studio hadn't, like, that studio has not, I think the last previous game it made, which the article notes was a horse breeding simulator called
Hours.
So it's possible there's some nepotism at play here, but you'd think that, like, someone at Ubisoft would note, like, the environment that this trailer was being released in.
Yeah.
And kind of change course. It's just it's also just, it's one of those things where, like, Ubisoft keeps on getting in this position where they're insisting that their games aren't political. And I want to say, like, Ubisoft top brass are saying their games aren't political. I think the creators go into it, and we've seen from some of the stuff that's come out, creators go into it with the intent to say something. It ultimately might get sanded over by the upper brass, but they do go in expecting to say something. But, like, you can't release something like this and continue to assert that your studio is not political.
I don't know how you, and this isn't a knock on Tom Clancy. I enjoy a lot of Tom Clancy stuff, but you can't release Tom Clancy stuff and be like, no, there's nothing political here.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Like, an apolitical Tom Clancy novel is just Jack Ryan doing his morning jog, and that, like, we never get beyond that. That's it.
I don't even think there is any. I mean, this is a larger conversation, but is there even anything as apolitical? I'm not sure if that's possible. We probably will talk about this whenever Ubisoft releases their next game. But this is just absurd.
Yeah. Well, to answer that question though, Cody, like, I don't think you can do anything that has war in it and not make it at least somewhat of a, like, not take some sort of a political leaning within it. Like, war is political at its core.
It's a political act.
So, yeah. Well, let's move on from politics and talk about this story about Animal Crossing putting Joe Biden campaign putting their yard signs inside of Animal Crossing. So, don't know if you guys have seen, but there's a man named Joe Biden who's running for president up against one Donald J. Trump, and you can now download all of these yard signs to display in front of your zero interest mortgaged home in Animal Crossing. I don't know how you guys feel when you see this stuff, and it doesn't matter what side it's coming from, who it's coming from. I always kind of roll my eyes a little bit. Like it's one thing if somebody, like, makes these and puts them into the game. I think it's another thing entirely when, like, a campaign is like, hello, we fellow kids. We play Animal Crossing too.
Just picture Joe Biden playing Animal Crossing.
Look, man, he took quarantine seriously, so I can see maybe he is the one that made these. I'd be way more into this if it was Biden that made these yard signs. Like, if
Biden was hopping on Twitch with AOC to
Big Bro Roy says, got to get those 14-year-old votes. Oh, wait, Biden forgot again.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
no. But, I mean, it's not 14-year-olds playing Animal Crossing, though, man.
Yeah,
it's
everybody.
Yeah. It was the game of quarantine, my dude.
I like how we're talking about quarantine like it's a thing of the past. Stay inside, folks. Just stay home. Please. There's no reason to get out there.
Yeah, like, Animal Crossing is the closest I'm ever going to come to owning a home, Big Boy. You're right.
So somebody on Facebook the other day asked about political yard signs and what the point of them was, and it got me, like, kind of interested in like the marketing aspect, because I'm in marketing, right? So there's actually been some pretty extensive studies on yard signs, and yard signs were originally developed because they thought that it would increase voter turnout in areas. But in reality, there is a small percentage of bump in terms of voter share for the person who has more yard signs in a particular district. And the reason for that is, especially in like a presidential election, right? Everyone's going to go to the polls with who they want to vote for president, and then realize, oh shit, there's like 6 other things I'm supposed to vote for on here. I don't know what I want to vote for. And so they go down and they just mark the things that they've seen. It especially works with like when there's like propositions to vote for, like pieces of legislation where there's not a clear party indicator next to it. So just a little fun tidbit about yard signs that I found.
There's a one of the competitors on America's Got Talent this year. I'm sorry, I do watch America's Got Talent. is a mentalist named Max Major, and what's cool about him is he's not trying to pretend that he's doing anything really psychic, right? He's just demonstrating how easy it is to plant an idea in somebody's head. And that one of the things he said this past week was advertising works on people because everyone thinks it doesn't work on them.
Big Boy Roy does bring up a good point in the chat. He says, all jokes aside, please go out and vote, people. He was fucking joking. But yeah, go vote. It's your civic duty. Take pride in the fact that we live in a country where we can, at least at this moment, freely vote.
Well, maybe don't go out. Do some mail-in voting.
Yeah, do some mail-in voting.
If you can.
Go out and vote's more of like a platitudinal thing.
Yeah. No, sure.
So
on the actual topic of the thing though, like it does, like it is kind of a roll your eyes, cringe, we fellow kids thing, but I don't know, I'm not bothered by it or anything. It made me chuckle. I'm going to remember that it happened, so at the end of the day he accomplished what he was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we're talking about it for sure.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Next one on the list, we're going to go down to Big Boy Roy territory here. Post Malone has purchased an undisclosed stake in the esports, in the Texas esports company, Envy.
Oh, Big Boy Roy territory. Post Malone, I was like, why is he?
I don't know. I don't know if Big Boy Roy's a Post Malone fan. I enjoy Post Malone's music, I won't lie. But no, it's in Texas, and that's where Big Boy Roy is. But Envy, who owns the Dallas Empire, the Dallas Fuel, they have other esports organizations that play throughout a variety of sports. And this is, I don't know how much there is to actually talk about here, except that, like, I think I wanted to have a bigger conversation about, like, how esports has kind of had this opportunity to really dominate and capture more eyes in the current, well, I mean, sports are slowly starting to come back, but especially there at the start of quarantine, like, there was such a big pivot, and esports figured it out really quickly how to facilitate their stuff in an online way because they're video games and you can do that sort of stuff. And I think it's just cool to me to see big name people get into this thing that I want so badly to be successful in the long term. And I think the more people we get like Post Malone, who isn't just a guy who's seeking to get rich off this thing. Like, if you guys don't know, Post Malone got his start on Twitch.
Yeah.
So, so like gaming is near and dear to his heart. And I just think it's cool to see celebrities jumping in and putting money behind this stuff.
Yeah. It's also, I was going to go in a different direction. I think it's also worth like noting, especially like in a world where like Drake went on Twitch and played Fortnite and stuff like that. And I think there have been more recent examples of especially professional athletes and like the whole Travis Scott thing in Fortnite too. Mm-hmm. Like the worlds of like musical artists, specifically hip hop, pop artists, and professional athletes, those combining with games is becoming just the norm. Because all these people grew up playing games and they play games in their off time. But to see those two worlds colliding is super cool to see. Especially because the people who do get involved, maybe outside of Drake, like are really ardent fans. Like Logic gave up his music career and is just going straight on Twitch now. And so it's cool to see like people from that world viewing this as like a legitimate means of either press or just like a way to pass the time and gain even more of an audience and a following.
Yeah. Music and games has always had a really cool relationship. Yeah. I mean, like, and it's cool to see how that's gotten way more involved over the last several years. But like, I mean, you think back, like so many people's music taste is just Tony Hawk. Like,
Tony Hawk, Guitar Hero.
I think about how big a deal Madden soundtrack reveals used to be back in the day, and how much of an honor musical artists thought it was to be selected to be on those soundtracks.
Breaking Benjamin was in Halo 2.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, it's cool. Big Roy says, kind of crazy. I like Post Malone as a person, but not into his music. He seems to kind of be leading the charge of celebs who aren't fake as fuck, which is awesome. So, I
totally.
All around, I think Post Malone is just a cool dude, and I am excited to see him. As I think he's going to be a guy who's really involved in the esports space too. He's not just going to be a guy who's like, I got money in it, so I can get some return off of it.
Yeah.
So. First good signing from the Dallas Fuel in a couple seasons. So, all right, let's move on. Cody, I think you're up next.
Yeah, there's not much to say on this particular item. I just saw it earlier today, but Hello Games announced that they're developing another follow-up to No Man's Sky, which is notable because they have actually released a follow-up to No Man's Sky last week. It's called The Last Campfire. It's an adventure puzzle game. I haven't played it much, so I'm not going to speak to that. But I think everybody's been wondering what Hello Games would do after No Man's Sky, and more specifically, how they would do it after No Man's Sky. Blew up probably way more than they expected it to. And so Sean Murray talked with Rush Stick over at Polygon. And kind of gave them a little insight, not as to what the game was, but as to the scale of it, saying it'll be more ambitious, kind of in line with No Man's Sky. But Murray was very adamant that he's going to be much more careful about like how he talks about the game, how press is done in support of the game leading up to launch and way ahead of launch. Which was a large part of the problem with No Man's Sky, which was the press cycle for that game. So it's nice to see he may have learned a little bit from that experience.
You mean Sony shouldn't parade him out to the Jimmy Fallon show while a team of 15 people are working on a game that they're saying is going to be, the most innovative game in generations?
Yeah, the Event Horizon. Yeah.
Yeah,
there's not much to say on this. I just thought I'd point it out.
No, and I think I think a lot of discussion around whatever Hello Games' next game is going to be that whole like, are they going to be able to manage expectations? But at the end of the day, it wasn't Hello Games that let it get out of control, right? No. Like, so
no, they had I think they probably knew better than Sony did what that game was going to be. And for what it's worth, that game has changed a lot since launch. Just worth noting. Mm-hmm. I went back and played it in the past few months, and it's really fun and really a lot deeper than it was at launch.
All right, last story in the slant.
I saw this on Twitter, and I think a lot of places have reported it, but I thought it was worth mentioning, especially because of Larry and I's interest in Avatar: The Last Airbender, a series which is on Netflix, and you should watch if you haven't. But there's a little game out there called Dreams from Media Molecule, and this game, I think, is a game of the year for 2020. Not because I've played it and think it's incredible, but just because it has captured, especially at a time like this where people have a lot of time on their hands, it has captured the imagination of a lot of people. Dreams is essentially like a games creator toolkit. You can create way more than games, but a lot of people have been creating games. And so this particular person, whose name is he goes by Elka Gaming, but his real name is Colin Gluth. He is attempting to create a video game adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender in Dreams, and he's calling it the Aang Project. He and two other people are working on it, and they're essentially like recreating big moments from the series within like an action game format, which I am fully in support of. I don't have Dreams, so I probably won't play it, but the fact that someone out there is making a video game of Avatar: The Last Airbender is heartening, especially because it's gotten so much renewed interest because it came on Netflix. But I think this is just a thing. I wanted to put this here because we haven't gotten the chance to talk about Dreams that much since it came out, and I think it's become a fascinating case study and like user created content. And this is like the stuff that they showed in this Fanbyte article by Patrick O'Donnell. Like just the screenshots alone are absolutely ridiculous when you think about like the tools these people are working with.
If they finish that Avatar series up by early next year, it will be the best Avatar remake of 2021, no doubt.
You throwing shade at the
there's a live action one coming out next year that the creator of the show walked away from.
Yeah.
I understand all of these jokes.
Sorry. Anyway, but no, that's really cool. And I kind of hope that the scenes and stuff they make for this, like they don't just like use them for making this series, but like give me access to that. I want to walk in this world, man. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I don't think you can create open world games in Dreams, but they said it. You said in the article that you can create like semi-open world games, so like wide linear or whatever you want to call that, which is awesome. Yeah, any more time I can spend in that world, I'll take.
Yeah.
All right.
And Dreams is a great idea. It's just not something that I've personally dabbled in, but I love the concept. And there was a game like that years ago on the 360. I can't remember the name of it. But
yeah, I remember that too.
But the technology just wasn't great yet was the issue with that one. And so I'm curious to, like, I haven't looked at Dreams at all, so I'm glad you reminded me that it existed.
Hold on, I want to find what this was. Project Spark. It was an Xbox One game. Yeah, it came out like right at the beginning.
Okay.
Came out right at the beginning of the Xbox One. I remember like getting my hands on it and being like, this is kind of cool, but I don't have the patience for this, which is the same kind of thing I have with Dreams. I'm like, I'd love to buy Dreams to play other people's stuff, but I feel like it's a waste because I'm not going to use it to create anything. You know,
I mean,
like I'm only using half of it.
I would genuinely buy it just for that one half, though. People are making ridiculous stuff.
All right, let's move on, guys, to our final segment, Offbeat, which is where we just do some quick hitter, strange and weird news stories from the gaming industry. I'm going to kick us off today. This one is from PC Gamer. The Witcher is getting a Pokemon Go style AR game. This one is funny to me because, first of all, The Witcher in a concept like Pokemon Go is funny to me. Like, The Witcher's really, really gritty and high fantasy, and
you're not catching things.
You're not catching things. You're slaying things, which is what it is. It's monster. It's called The Witcher Monster Slayer. But also because there's been tons of like AR adaptations that I don't feel like have taken off, and so for there to be a Witcher one seems strange to me as well. This is another one of those like people trying to capture a phenomena that's way past. But like, how do you even launch one of these games now in a COVID world?
That's what I was going to say. This is coming out at the wrong time.
Especially the drawback to Pokemon and Ingress and others is the way those games are set up. You're rewarded for playing them in urban, highly populated areas. If you're playing them in the middle of nowhere, they're basically unplayable. And so this is encouraging mass gatherings for sure.
Yeah, I am actually super intrigued by this, and not just because, like, speaking of worlds, I can't wait to spend more time in. Like, I will ingest every and all piece of Witcher content possible. But part of like one of the interesting parts of the Witcher lore is that Witchers are largely solitary people. It's not like Pokemon where like constantly interacting with trainers. And so I wonder if this game will capture that and not rely so much on the social aspect and maybe rely just more on you kind of wandering around the world. Like I think the article not only has a great subhead, Tom Senior. The subhead is, the game should teach us some important life lessons. Lessons are a type of creature in The Witcher. But he points out like how entertaining some of the comments have been on the YouTube trailer for this. And one of the comments from No Cap Gaming was, "Can't wait for graveyards and swamps to become social gathering spots." LMAO. And it's like true. Like, so much of the Witcher universe takes place in like these gritty backwaters and kind of places in the middle of nowhere. So I wonder if the game could potentially capitalize on that. They can't, like, it is a networked game, so they can adjust all this stuff kind of as they go. But like, there are elements of this that sound intriguing to me. I'll probably try it out for like a few days and then get rid of it. But the fact that there's combat in it, the fact that you concoct potions and oils and stuff like that, and it sounds like it said that there's rich story-driven quests inspired by other games from the series, which intrigues me, because I don't think any of these games have had a heavy narrative element to them, as far as I know.
No.
And that's what The Witcher is known for. So to be able to integrate some of that into this intrigues me.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'll probably download onto my phone just to see how it works. I doubt I'll get into it though, like super into it.
It's also worth noting that's what I said about Thronebreaker, the standalone Gwent story-driven thing for The Witcher, and I am upset. I love that game.
Oh yeah, I've seen you, like, I don't know if you've been tweeting. I've seen you talking about it somewhere.
Yeah, I'll tweet about it to anyone who listens, because I think it's actually a really solid story. It's just hidden in the guise of this trading card game.
Much like the Grimoire cards.
Yes.
Destiny.
Our favorite part of Destiny 1.
That's right. Reading our Grimoire cards, not within the client itself, but on our phones. Next story. Halo Infinite and Monster Energy. Larry, this is one that you tried to catapult us into earlier in the show.
Yes.
Halo Infinite and Monster Energy are offering double XP boosts before the game releases. And this is from Tom Meyer over at my old stomping grounds, Twinfinite. Microsoft announced it is partnering with Monster Energy to give away XP boosts and in-game items for Halo Infinite before the game releases in 2021. The problem is the promotion runs from September 1st to December 31st, 2020. Not a lot to say here, I don't guess. Obviously, this is like a partnership that was struck before the delay, and this is probably not something that's easy to pump the brakes on when you're printing special cans and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I said it as a joke earlier, but by the time Halo got delayed, there were almost certainly warehouses of these cans already made and ready to go.
It's kind of like how they make how they make like Super Bowl winter gear for both teams, and then whoever doesn't win, they just like ship them off somewhere. Like, that's kind of what this feels like. Oh, like, we were prepared for this to come out here, but now it's just going to become like a relic of a time that never came, which was when Halo was out in 2020.
Which really makes these monster cans like the perfect visual representation of 2020.
That's true.
And the perfect representation of Halo Infinite.
That's true again. Yeah. Man, who'd have known Monster Energy had such, narrative layers? All right, Cody, I think you dropped this last one in here, so I'll give it over to you.
Yeah, I labeled it in our show notes, "Don't Get Cocky, Kid." From one of Larry's favorite properties, Star Wars. But this comes from a story over on GameSpot from Gabe Gerwin. Call of Duty cheater banned after bragging on Twitch. There's not much to say here other than I can't stand cheaters in games, and I love when they are taken to task and justice is served, and it is served so rarely. So the incident in question was a Call of Duty player was streaming themselves playing Warzone. They apparently did very well, and they stopped streaming to brag, or they stopped playing to brag about their how good they were doing. And the streamer, whose name is Mr. Golds, had his screen showing while he was playing. He was screen sharing and he's streaming it. Windows Task Manager popped up, and it showed everything that's going on in his computer, every program that's running. And one of the programs that was running was Engine Owning, which is a cheating program. Viewers definitely noticed it, and they shared the clip online. It got tweeted out, subtweeted, and eventually made its way to Twitch, who banned him. You can no longer watch Mr. Gold stream. I'm sorry if that is a great disruption to your viewing experience.
This is bigger than Dr. Disrespect.
But he knows why.
Yeah, he definitely knows why.
He's going to be on YouTube tomorrow like, I have no idea why I got banned from Twitch.
How do I get a press tour?
hello, Washington Post. Oh man,
there's not much to say here.
There was like 1,800 people watching him at the time. So yeah, I love stories like this.
I do too.
All right, guys. Man, does it feel good to be back, or does it feel good to be back?
Oh, so
I love it.
I missed it. I'm so glad for everyone who stopped by in the chat. If we missed a comment or something, totally apologize for that. Guys, we're excited to be back. We're going to be back every single week to do this show now. Hope you like the new format. If not, we love hearing feedback. Join our Discord, tweet at me or any of the other hosts. Beal for Real says, glad you're back. Thank you, Beal. But yeah, let us know what you think of the new format. Hit us up with any feedback with regards to that. We're going to be making changes to the show. It's going to be evolving. So just be on the lookout for cool new things. Normally we'll do a post show, but we've gone for like an hour and 45 minutes today, which is much longer than our general podcast. But we wanted to make sure we left space for us to. We essentially did the old show plus the new show with the way that we did the dive this week. So next week will be a shorter show, so we'll stick around and do the post show after that. But guys, let's go around the circle. Tell people who you are, where they can find you, and what are you going to be tweeting about this week. Larry, let's start with you.
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at Still in Flux.
Feels weird, don't it?
It does. And I haven't been tweeting much lately because you can also find me on Twitch at Still in Flux. And it's September. Just throwing that out there. And I just hit affiliate, so find me there.
Affiliate.
There you go. I just threw your link in the chat. All right, Coddington.
My name is Coddington Bear. Coddington P. Bear, sorry.
Yeah, some of the greatest Christmas films of all time.
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at ProElectioneer, and I'll probably be tweeting about this obscure Witcher card game that nobody gives a shit about.
Wait, isn't Paddington Bear considered to be like a Christmas film in England? I thought it was. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I'm not English.
I don't know. My name's Luke Croft. You can find me on Twitter at itishoagie. I actually haven't been tweeting a whole lot recently either. I'm probably just going to get back into it. The new TFT set looks really cool, so probably going to be tweeting about that. Also, maybe streaming a little bit of it too. But guys, this has been PvA Radio, episode 73. You can find us live over here every single Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Pacific Time. Twitch.tv/itishoagie. If you miss it live, you can listen to it on podcast services everywhere, and also youtube.com/PvA Radio. Keep up with us, guys. Join our Discord. Drop questions, stories, anything you want us to cover. We'll take a look at that as well. Thanks to everybody in the chat, and until next time, we love you. Goodbye.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Watch your lightning, they call that shortwave radio.